Hey, back out here playing cars. Vintage air system is all complete on the Great Pumpkin. Now we're going to get into doing some body work. All this stuff here, you know where all that stuff gets used for, why it gets used, and all the good things. Well, that's what I'm going to share with you. The best way, or what's worked for me over the years, or I guess we go back to say the right way, the wrong way, and then the VVG way. Now, of course, there's a lot of do's, don'ts, lots of opinions on all of this. This is only my opinion and the results that I've gotten from it. And I'm going to show you how we get it done. Now, with that being said, let's get started. These cars are made out of metal. Metal, when it's left exposed to the weather, likes to rust. Rust is our enemy. That is the last thing we want festering underneath our new paint job and all of our body work. So, first things first, eradicate the rust, sandblast to clean it out. But that's going to be something you have to do as your base, because we all know the paint job is only as good as its foundation. All the magic in a pretty paint job and body is the actual body work underneath it. So that needs to be done. And a few things to keep in mind while you're doing it, so it's going to be durable and long lasting. Because the other thing you want to keep in mind is this shiny paint stuff that I buy, PPG stuff. Love it, but let's just call it what it is. Freaking expensive. To put it in perspective, there's almost $2,000 in materials in just the paint, the base coat and the clear coat and all the stuff to make it go psh on the car. So the last thing you want is, once you get it all painted 3 to 4 months later, bubbles popping back through your beautiful paint job. So how do we prevent that? What do we need to do? That's what I'm going to share with you. Okay, step one, right? Go ahead and mix a body filler up, smear it over the entire car on top of the rust, sand it straight, and paint it, right? No, absolutely not. It's exactly the wrong thing you want to do when doing body work. This is the original paint. That's rust. You put body filler on top of that. It's going to rust back through. It's going to look good for a little while, but it's going to fail. The best thing that I have found, and it works great for me, and this is why I've done it this way, and you guys have seen me build this whole body shell again here in this car, but new quarter panels, sections things together, but I still had the car media blasted. That is my favorite way to prep a car for body work, because the next step, as soon as it gets back from media blasting, go directly to an epoxy primer, or I guess you still go self-etching, but an epoxy primer, go right to that. It will bond, will not peel off, seals up the metal, and you have a perfect foundation to start building on all your body work like we just talked about. That's the magic. This is our foundation. Clean that metal first 100%. If you media blast it, that's just my favorite. Now, you can have it chemically dipped, but there's some more steps to the process if you have it chemically dipped before you can go right to paint. EDP primer. This stuff is fantastic for storage and shipping. Manufacturer says you can just scuff it and paint right on top of it. I definitely would not recommend that. I've seen the results. This stuff does not bond to the metal as well as it should sometimes. Through the process of stamping, who knows what's underneath this? My opinion, sand all this off, or media blast it all off, and then start over. If you mechanically sand that with a DA, it will need to be acid etched or metal prepped first, and then add your primer on top of that and go from there. But this will not be on here when I'm done, because that's why I said we hung the quarters, and someone made the question, why the heck would you put the brand new quarter panels, then have it media blasted? Well, because I don't like sanding, so I figured I'd let them go ahead and media blast it, prime it. These are ready to do body work. That's going to be something we'll do here after a bit. So that's step one. That's our foundation. We have a great metal, has been cleaned and conditioned, and paint, or epoxy paint on there. That's what we're going to start with as for our base. Next thing you do then after that, you can start doing some filler work. Now, hear me out on this filler work thing here. Now, body filler is a fantastic part of the process. It's a necessary evil. I am not perfect at working metal. You need this stuff to make it look right. But with that being said, there's a lot of opinions on body filler over top of primer. Now, my opinion, now hear me out. I've read a lot of studies. I've seen some things going both ways. But if it started out, typically, everyone tells you, you put that stuff right over top of bare metal. Like, you key the heck out, like 40 grit, 36 grit, and let it bite into the metal, and it won't fall out. That's true. Still holds on really great. But here's the thing I like to keep in mind and want you to keep in mind. I drive these cars when I get them done. I don't drive them in the salt and the slop and the crap, but I drive them. I get rock chips. I get door dings. It happens. And if you expose that, open that surface, you allow moisture to get in under your layers. And under that layers is this silly putty or Bondo or body filler. Well, it holds moisture. You have now allowed a way to water get in, touch that bare metal, which we talked about earlier. Water, metal, bare steel, rust, problems. So how do I prevent that? Or, well, at least in my mind, what I see, well, if you still have this epoxy primer underneath your body filler, so if you do get a rock chip, you have a bit of a shield before it can get to that bare metal. So it's going to be more durable and last longer. Again, my opinion. What I've seen, though, There's some people have done some testing. Call it destructive testing. Some of my favorite stuff. They take panels and paint with a primer, epoxy, or self-etch, put a layer of body filler, bond them together, and put it in a machine and see how much force it takes to pop them apart. Well, they've done it with different primers, many different types of primers, and then of course bare steel, keying it up with your 36 grit or leaving it smoother, and doing the same test. Guess what? They all did about the same. So the old wise tale saying it won't bond, well, I call garbage. And that test proves it. And all the cars I have built have not had any issues with it bonding. Now, there's some things you do first. You have to still scuff or etch, or I guess you could say key up the primer a little bit, open it up some so the body filler bonds to it. But I just don't like putting on bare metal, and that's why. Let's walk around here to the front of the car. I've got the hood put on the car here. I was setting all the body gaps in preparation for the Bodywork special. This is rust. This is bad. People call surface rust no big deal. Well, let me tell you what, it kind of is. This stuff is bad. You can't just put body filler on it. You can't just grind on it and just hope it goes away. You need to remove rust in its entirety. It's like a cancer. It does not go away. I don't even believe the chemical treaters or treatment stuff you can put on here and build on top of it. I just wouldn't trust it. In this case here, I want to take this hood off. We're going to send it to the media blaster. That will take care of the rust, and then immediately go to epoxy primer. Just something here. This is not a good foundation. Many times I've seen that, and you try to grind it smooth and put stuff on top. It'll actually hold up for quite a while because these cars don't see the bad weather anymore. But if you want something super long term, this really needs to be completely removed and then start building on top of that. Okay, now we've opened the door for some body filler where it needs to go on there. There's different flavors, different kinds, and different types. Where do you use them? When do you use them? So I'm going to share or shed some light on how I do this. Duraglass is a fiberglass reinforced stuff, all metal, expensive, but serves a purpose. Love this stuff. There's definitely a time and a place. This is your regular body filler you use for the bulk of almost all your repairs. And there's a glaze coat. It's really thin, flows out real nice, helps remove any kind of pinholes or sand scratch marks. So those are the 4 basic ones that I use the most. Now these 2 don't use very often. There's a time and a place, but probably the biggest one I use the most is this all metal stuff. The idea with body filler, the thinner the better. 1/8 inch or less is the goal. So your metalwork needs to be good. Well, let's just be honest, we're not perfect. So there's situations where you need a little more than 1/8 inch. Sometimes I'll use the fiberglass underneath as a good strong base, and then I add my other layers on. But this stuff here comes into handy when you're going back to these lead seams back here. Now, when it comes to these lead seams, you can see the lead behind the paint here. When that was media blasted, of course, it pitted it up just a little bit. But what I had to do here was, well, I had to remove some of the lead because I made a patch panel here, if you guys remember that in the earlier videos, for the radiator. It has some holes in it. But while doing that, you have to remove the lead. It just won't weld. So now I have a gap here that is definitely thicker than 1/8 of an inch deep. So what's going to happen? Well, that's where this comes into play, this all metal stuff. It's a metal reinforced putty. Kind of has a silverish look anyway, similar to the lead. I'll go ahead and just fill that in, sand it straight, and then we're good to go. This is where I use that at. And then once you're happy with your all metal repair, that's when you come back with your regular filler to blend it out. And this is your final step on top. So you're going to go like different grits of sandpaper to get to those steps. So that's going to be one of the things we'll get into here next. All right, step 3 is going to be choosing your sanding block or your method of how you're going to sand it. And there's different grits of sandpaper. Obviously, the higher the number, the finer the grit where it barely scratches. You can get stuff as high as like 5,000, 6,000 grit sandpaper. Imagine trying to sand off some of this stuff with 6,000 grit sandpaper. You'll be here forever. So that's where it comes into play. What do you do? When do you stop? What do you shift to next? So let's say you've done some filler work, right? Well, especially like with this stuff here, you may knock it down with some 36 or 40 grit to get it close, and then finish it with something like an 80 grit, like here, like labeled here on the back, and that gets you pretty close. So once these are, you would say, we'll call it close, then you come back and put some of your regular body filler on it. And this here, I'd probably stop some around 180 grit, and then go ahead and hit it with a glaze coat. And that kind of fills in all the last little bit of imperfections and everything else. And then I will finish up, before I put primer on, somewhere around the 320 grit sandpaper mark. So I'll go from like 180, 220, 320. Then once I'm happy with the 320, that's when I go ahead and reprime the car with a high build primer. So very little primer needed to finish up. Don't use primer to finish in all your little sand scratch marks. They will bleed back through. And the reason they bleed back through, let's talk about shrinkage. No, it's not cold in here. I didn't just get out of the pool, but we're talking about this stuff over time. It's a chemical, it's plastic, it shrinks and gets smaller. And when it does, it pulls down and it'll highlight all of your sanding marks. So especially the high build primers, those shrink at a higher rate than the body filler does. So if you're filling in sand scratch marks or deep, something like 200 to a heavier grit sandpaper with high build primer, well, within a year or two, you're gonna have sand scratch marks bleeding through your finish, and you're gonna go, that sucked. And then you're gonna wonder the question why. Well, why is because you need to fill those in with something else besides just high build primer. That stuff is beautiful, sprays on, sand's wonderful, but longevity or long lasting repair, you don't want to do or sculpt a car out of a high build primer. Now, speaking of sculpting a car, sanding blocks. When, where, why, and how? Let me show you. All right, let's talk sanding blocks, or actually our DA sander even. These things are great. I mean, there's a little thing that just drives some people nuts. I don't oil this bad boy. There's a few reasons I don't. These things are cheap. Get them from Harbor Freight. If it blows up, no big deal. If you oil it, you're going to run a risk of blowing oil all over your metalwork, and to me, that will cause fish eyes. This thing's a whole lot cheaper to replace. And then we talked about the $2,000 loss of materials on paint. So again, that's just my way of taking care of or not taking care of my DA. As you can tell, not an expensive brand. But the thing about a DA is let it do its thing. Leave it flat on the panel. Don't tip it up on its side and do some cutting. You're going to end up with some grooves in your body panel. This is just kind of blend things out. Let the DA do its job by keeping it flat to the surface. Sanding blocks. Now, Durablock is the brand, of course. Now, I love them. They work great. I have multiple different flavors and shapes and sizes. They all kind of serve a purpose, but basically you want to follow the length of the panel best you can with the longest board as possible so you don't get the wavy finish, or you want to get this thing nice and flat so you get that mirror smooth flat finish. When we look down the side of this car, if you look at the reflection, like even this line in the garage floor, it'll reflect nice and straight down the side of the car if you do how we're going to do this one here. Sometimes you'll see where that line will kind of get a little dip or a wave. Well, that's why we didn't use the right block, we didn't blend the filler, or we just didn't get the metal worked as good as we should have. And speaking of that, there's a time and a place, but I try to use a block for 99.9% of my sanding. Never just take your hand and hand sand something. You'll end up where your fingertips are hitting at. You'll have some deep grooves, and the same thing, that light will actually follow those grooves. So bare hand sanding, super rare occasion would I ever do that. Normally almost 99% of the time, even something as small as this little block here, I'm going to use that instead of just my hand to keep equal pressure to help blend out or prevent any of that waviness. And as much as I like my car waving and saying hi to me, I really don't want to be the cause of it. So with that being said, all the different shapes, there's a purpose and a place. We'll get into a little further of that when I get deeper into the bodywork stuff, but I'm just kind of covering the basics this go around. Okay, and the next part was, of course, the idea is use as little of this stuff as possible. So that being said, you can see this car is back on the floor. It has 4 tires back on it. There's a reason I do this. There's a method to this madness. You may be scratching your head sometimes. Why is the engine all pretty? Why is this dash partially together? Why do we have shiny wheels and tires, which, by the way, look fantastic on here? 14 by 7-inch Pontiac Rallies. Ooh, loving it. The reason I do this, now we have the weight of the suspension. The subframe is loaded here in the front, because it's going to potentially distort these gaps in body panel alignment. So I want the weight of the car. That's why the engine, the transmission, some of the weight of the dash. I'll even go as far as throw in a couple bags of sand to simulate the weight of the glass and the interior to get this car to really settle down, because I'm dialing in the door gaps, dialing in the fender gaps. I'm dialing this car all in to get the bodywork as clean and as straight as possible. So when you sight down this car, you have a nice, even reflection. The door isn't stepped. They line up great top to bottom. These are the little details that set your car apart, or it looks a little better. And of course, this is probably more effort than what the factory put into them, but this is just how I've done it, and I've had great success. So that being said, like I said, we put the hood on just for alignment purposes. I've got a nice, even gap now on this hood. Even shuts beautifully. Lines up here with the front of the fender. Great. These are original doors and fenders. Nice, even gap. When it comes to that gap between the panels, never use this stuff to reshape the leading edge or the tailing edge of this fender to dial in the gap. It will chip off, you'll have exposure to water, and it just doesn't look good, and it is not durable. Back to that $2,000 materials, boop, chipped. Good luck trying to blend autumn bronze on the side of this car later on when that chips out. Just don't do it. What you need to do then is, if you've added a replacement fender or a door and the gap isn't quite right, weld something on the edge here to get the gap dialed in to where you like it, where it's nice and even. Because we know the repop stuff doesn't always fit that great. You're going to modify the leading edge. One of the things I love about this car, I didn't have to do it this go around. And here's something else I want to show you. Of course, this is probably the coolest straight edge ever. What I've been working on is shimming the fenders and shimming the doors. So when you get this thing all buttoned up, there is no gap between the door and the fender. There is no height difference where, like, let's say if I had that wrong where the fender was in further or out further, the door wouldn't line up. Then how do you fix that? Well, you're going to put an excessive amount of filler on the fender or on the door to get that where it's nice and straight, to get that where that reflection down the side of this car, let's say this garage seam here is reflecting off that side of the car, you want it to be nice and straight down the side. You don't want to get to the fender, hit the door, and then it jumps right in, then come back this way and comes back out. And even all of our sanding blocks, you don't want the side of the car waving to you. This is why I'm showing you all these things behind the scenes and the why, so that you can get that nice. Even the body line, we started off, remember this body line? When I was building the car, I put a piece of tape on it to highlight it so we can have this body line shoot straight down the car. So when it's all said and done, you can already see it here in just the primer. That's how much I want these cars dialed in. Again, probably better than factory, but this is how I like to get it done. I also wanted to share these tips with you. And then, of course, you super observant, sharp people have probably seen this bad boy right here. Plastic drop cloths, right? What's that for, you're saying? Well, remember we did the vintage air kit. We did the engine and transmission, all detailed and beautiful. I do that for the whole reason we talked about the tires. I just wanted the weight of the car on the vehicle. I don't want to take the engine and transmission back out. I'm in there, it's done, it's finished. So I'm going to mask everything off. Gonna cover up my dash, sealed up, don't get dust, overspray and junk. Gonna cover up all the engine compartment for the same idea, to help reduce the amount of dirt getting in there, and just an off chance, maybe some overspray. So that's gonna be one of the next things I'm gonna get ready to do here. Go ahead and mask this car off and get ready to do some of the body work.
So there you have it. There's a lot of things behind the scenes to make these cars look really great that has nothing to do with sanding or painting. It's just getting there. That's the magic. That's the prep work. That's all the time invested to make these things pop and set them apart. And like I said, I have probably 5 hours-ish and just dialing in these body panels, shimming them, tweaking them, prying on them, working with a hammer and a dolly. These are all things I maybe should have done a video on, but I have kind of done those in the past with some of the other builds. And my buddy Louie at First Generation Garage, he did a video here recently. The biggest thing is leave everything loose and keep shifting it around till you get it all dialed in, and then you tighten it up. I wholeheartedly 100% believe in that. But I may do some of the tweaking on it here. We're getting ready to do some of the body work, but that'd be the video we're going to get into next. How to mix this stuff up, put it on, blend it out where you can't see it, so you don't see where the repairs were done when it's all said and finished. That's what we're going to get into next, but wanted to show you some of the do's, don'ts, secrets, ins and outs of making this stuff happen. And of course, Firebird Fest coming up in May. I'm probably going to go ahead and pop out to the Trans Am Nationals. I'm not sure if I can make it all weekend. Got some things happening, but I'll definitely be there for Tip City Cruise and sneak in there partially for the Trans Am Nationals one of the days to stop by and visit. Hope to see you guys there. And of course, next go around, plenty of bodywork stuff. So stay tuned. Please subscribe, share with your friend. And speaking of that, 4,000 subscribers. We hit over that now. That is great. The 2-year mark, still got a couple months before we hit the 2-year mark. But I was thinking, this is just me thinking, I don't know that too much. I might hurt myself, but I'd love to have your help in a situation here. I'd like to see if we can hit 5,000 before the 2-year mark, which is April 15th, tax day. Crazy how I did that. But I can use your help by if you could take your favorite video or this video, post it on any social media, share it with whoever you can. Love to get the word out there, what we're doing here, trying to help build these cars, build some dreams, get things going, and proving to you it can be done in a 2-car garage. And I know that this doesn't happen without you where I've gotten to today. And some of you have already been sharing my videos, and I cannot thank you enough. But anyone who hasn't and you might think you might want to or could help me out, please do. I have seen really great results and people have done that. It really helps bring a lot of new viewers to the channel, and I deeply appreciate that. I know it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It's just kind of a personal goal. It's just kind of fun, but I'd love to see 5,000 before the 2-year mark. So if you guys could help with that, great. Appreciate you following me on this journey nonetheless, just the same. And of course, anything you'd like to see or any part of this that you'd like to have some highlights on, please let me know in the comments. But nonetheless, enough of this. I'm going to grab me something to eat and we'll come back out here and start mixing some putty, but that's going to be the next video, and I hope we see you then. See you next time.